Welcome alle sammen. How would one become a berserker back almost 1,000 years ago? Well, we don't know, and this was not exactly something that would have been written down at the time. Most of the sources that we have from the time are written by Christians, who in the Viking Age and post-Viking Age were trying very hard to remove all bit of evidence of pagan belief and practice. Berserkers were even outlawed at a certain point around the year 1000. So how to become this most ferocious warrior through the ancient ritual of bringing a spirit of a wolf or a bear into your body to fight, this is not something we are going to be finding in the sources like a step-by-step guide. However, if we compare and contrast the sources from different times and different countries and different places, different histories, we can start to get a very good idea of what might have been actually done to acquire the skills, ability, and status that would make one a berserker or ulfheidin. So on we go. First thing you have to understand is the concept of the Koios, which is the theoretical band of warriors going through an initiation period as young men. And we find traces of this all over Indo-European culture going back thousands of years. You all know this probably best from the Spartan practice of the Krypteia, the young men going out to fend for themselves and grow through the years of training and hardship in order to become men. But we have this tradition in literally every Indo-European culture. I made a video on it a while back, but I had to take it down. I will remake it and release those sources on another video maybe later this month. But for now, you can all just search Koios online and you will get a quick idea of what I mean. So, step number 1 to becoming a berserker. It's an initiation to becoming a man. A group of young men are sent out of society to fend for themselves. They would steal or rob in order to feed themselves, provided it wasn't from their own home society, as told in Tacitus Germania. That would be no honor lost if you stole from elsewhere. They also had a responsibility of defending their society from certain threats. Usually it would be defending the livestock from predatory animals, things like that. Now, how long this period of initiation would be would also depend on the culture. Some places would send the young men out for many years, and sometimes they would send them out for just a winter season. But either way, step number 1 is to be sent out into the wild and fend for themselves. Step 2 would actually be an initiation ritual before they are sent out into the wild. So we have small clues that this ritual happened all over Europe, but the most detailed accounts of it actually come from the Vedic sources, like ancient India area at the time, where the people there would really have not been very different at all to the Europeans at the time. They're all Indo-Europeans, remember, if we go back far enough. So there would be a festival and a sacrifice on the winter solstice. In the Vedic tradition, it's called Ekstaka. And there would be a festival to celebrate, and there would be an animal sacrifice, and the purpose was to be reborn as dogs of war. At least that's what it was called in the Vedic tradition, but it could have been a wolf or a bear or a boar or a mountain lion, depending on the culture and where the culture was and the nature around it. As always, in the Norse culture, it would have been a wolf. Perfect telling of this actually comes in the Sigurd cycle poems and Völsunga saga, where Sigmund and Sinfjotli go out and they actually become wolves in this source. Next is step 3. At this ritual, the young men would consume, most likely, some sort of intoxicating drink and work themselves up into a trance-like fury where their human spirit symbolically died and they would be reborn as dogs of war, as it was called in the Vedic tradition. Some people, for some reason like to claim the moral high ground, and they don't want to admit that their ancestors in the Norse world consumed any psychoactive substances. Look, all humans did these things if we go back far enough. People back then were not more disconnected with nature, they were more connected with nature, and they were more knowledgeable about the plants and substances found in their own nature and the effects that they would bring. So they would have full knowledge of every single plant, unlike we do today. And they viewed many of these plants as being sacred for the effects that they can bring. Although I agree that our ancestors would not have consumed these intoxicating drinks or substances often at all, maybe they would do it just once in their lifetime as an initiation, but I think they definitely did it at least in a certain class of society, especially in the noble warrior class. Again, depending on the time and place, this was a separate class of people. Even in the Norse sources, there are references in the mythology. If you look deep enough, yeah, we don't have any real sources about this sacred psychoactive drink, but in the Norse world, it would have most likely been some sort of henbane or nightshade drink that they drank from a horn that a maiden served them. Then finally, before they were sent out into the wild, in the Vedic tradition, again, a dice game was played in order to determine the leader of the band of young men. But the Norse and Germanic people too had a long tradition of dice and casting lots, and believed that these things were influenced by the gods and fate. So the leader would have been determined by throwing dice or lots. Step number 4 would be some sort of hunt. Of course, the main function of this warrior band was to defend the outskirts of society from predatory animals, or even raiders or thieves, but eventually the men would have needed to hunt down the predatory animal and acquire the skin to use. The skin of the animal would be called the hammer in the Norse beliefs. They believed that some part of the spirit of that animal was said to live on in that pelt. So they hunt down a pack of wolves, or they hunt down a bear and kill it, and they take the skin to wear. This is actually where the names Berserker and Ulfheden means bear coat or bear skin or wolf coat, something like that. Step number 5. This isn't really a step, just a little fun fact. We think that this whole berserker hunt ritual is related to the famous wild hunt, or perhaps the two are one and the same, if we go back far enough. All these tales about the wild men going on a hunt right around New Year and the winter solstice that we have in the folk tradition, and some tales even refer to these men as Odin's warriors or Odin's hunters. Of course, in the sources, Odin is always the god associated with the berserkers and the warrior class, and there is also most likely going to be a connection to Odin's son, Vali, too. So Vali was the son of Odin who was born to avenge Baldur's death and kill Hodr, the one who killed Baldur. Baldur's death is a myth about the summer dying and the winter coming. Vali is born after Baldur is killed, and he starts killing at only 1 night old. Just like the Berserker band goes through the ritual and is symbolically reborn as the dogs of war, remember? Then Vali will not wash his hands or cut his hair until he slays Baldur's killer. So the berserkers would have a time of no cutting their hair or washing until they completed their hunt. And of course, wolves are always associated with winter and death in the Norse belief. So there is some theories out there that the wolves were symbolically hunted down and they were killed, like the symbolically killing the winter spirits and bringing back the summer spirit, aka Baldur, back to life. But this is just theory, and there are definitely not the only option there, but it's a great theory, and you can read about it in Weig's book. The link will be below on that. Step number 6. This is a strange one. You coat yourself with the afterbirth of a wolf. The reason I say this is, from a bit later on in time, we actually have a couple folk tales from Scandinavia that if you covered yourself with the afterbirth of a wolf, you would gain special abilities. You would gain the ability of being able to shift your hammer. You would be hammer. You would gain the ability to become a werewolf. Werewolves in the folk tradition, when they're mentioned, they usually, almost always are referring to berserkers. They are parallels or later on evolutions of that. We can't say for certain, but what was potentially done is the band of young men would go out on the hunt, like I spoke about, and they would track down a wolf pack and they would wait. They would follow them all winter long until the spring comes in March-April time, where wolves usually give birth. Or if the berserkers were going after bears, it would be around February time where they would move in for the kill when the bears give birth. And the hunters would move in on the pack, kill all the wolves or bears, take the pelts to wear them for good, and coat themselves with the afterbirth of the pregnant female wolves. The afterbirth, the placenta, being probably one of the most sacred parts of our whole spirituality, honestly, and it was used in many different pagan rituals for different purposes all around the world. So I know it sounds horrible and cruel to hunt down and slaughter a wolf pack after they have just given birth to pups, and it is. It is cruel for us today to do so. I do not condone any of this. You cannot do that because wolves are endangered in most places. But previously in history, this was very different. Wolves were definitely not endangered. They were overpopulated and they multiplied like crazy every year, bringing about nothing but death and misery and starvation. It's hard for us to imagine today, but our ancestors would have feared wolves more than anything else. Not only did the wolves try to kill anyone who wandered alone into the woods, but they would kill your livestock, they would kill your children, take everything, rob you of the food you needed to survive. So pretty much any time in history before the 1800s, which unfortunately a wolf population was hunted to extinction in most places in Europe and North America. It's a horrible thing, but before that time, any time in human history, a wolf hunt, a small wolf hunt, not hunting them to extinction, but a small wolf hunt would have been necessary for the village and society to survive. Step number 7, the return to society. Of course, in all cultures where the band of men go out into society and achieve the accomplishment of being a berserker, or the Greek ephebos, or whatever other culture there is, there would be some ways of integrating them back into society. Sometimes it's another initiation, ritual, sacrifice. Some other places it's a marriage to integrate them back to society. Sometimes it's being sent to serve in the army, but in the Norse sources the tradition is unclear. We're not sure, but it seems like in the early Viking Age and before then too, they would be selected to serve as the king's guard or the chieftain's guard. Harald Fairhair was actually the last king said to have Ulfhednar as his personal guard. And after that, what happened in the Norse society about mid-Viking Age, same thing that happened everywhere else. Society started to get too big, too civilized, and the need for these elite, wild, wolf-like war bands started to disappear, and they stopped having a need from them, and they stopped being respected, and in the late Viking Age, they ended up being just kind of a nuisance for people. They were kind of just bothering the tribe, bothering the village, and they were even outlawed in Scandinavia at a certain point. So really, there was no integration back into society for these men in the Viking Age. But this is probably the most important part, because this is what enables the men to be brought back into society and respected and honored in order to keep carrying on this tradition so it lives. So some integration is definitely needed, whatever that may be. Final step, last step, number 8. Getting to this berserker state. It's very clear from the sources that this was a temporary state of mind, from being a totally civilized gentleman, and then when necessary, you work yourself up into this frenzy in order to fight, and then back to normal, back to being a functioning, respectful member of society after that was done. We're not sure exactly what was done in order to work themselves up into this state. There are 2 theories by most people, very ignorant people on both sides, I may add. One side is saying that the berserkers took drugs. They ate lots of mushrooms and they went crazy. And the other side of the argument is saying that Vikings didn't take drugs. You know, those guys saying, oh, I'm descended from berserkers and I just see red and I can get to this state naturally. The truth is going to be somewhere in the middle of these two. Although I think drugs were absolutely not necessary. No psychoactive substances were necessary to get to this state. I think they were definitely sometimes used, but it's not mushrooms, guys. The Amanita muscaria theory was debunked about 100 years ago. They thought that, but they know it's not possible now for a few reasons. The main one being the effects. You are not exactly going to be a productive warrior when you're on these mushrooms. They make you sick, stomach pains, they make you drowsy, slow, and just a worthless warrior pretty much. So scholars have suggested the much more likely substance, if any was used at all, would have been henbane. Either a henbane drink, as we have recipes for in Northern Europe, like a henbane beer, but these were all banned in the 1500s with the Reinheitsgebot, and still banned today. This law is still in effect, that you're not allowed to use different herbs and substances to put in the beer. Or they could have possibly lit the henbane seeds on fire and inhaled the fumes, as the Greek oracles did and other seerses did, that we know they did in Scandinavia too, from the archaeological finds. So henbane makes you energized, and it makes you feel like you're floating, it makes you feel like super light, and among other effects. And this is something that would make an effective fighter, so most likely it could have been henbane used, but like I said, I absolutely don't think it's necessary. You can get to this state naturally. That being said, your temper tantrums aren't the Berserker State, okay? We are not looking for anger here, guys. It's a different state of mind than anger. Anger and just seeing red is not going to get you anything except tired and then killed. If you don't believe me, just go take your ass to a jiu-jitsu gym or a boxing gym and watch how quickly you get dealt with. You will see, yeah, sure, you might see red, and then you'll go hard and you'll be dangerous for 30, maybe 45 seconds, okay? And then you'll be blowing wind, you'll be so tired, and an opponent who knows what they're doing will deal with you very quickly after that. I see it every day, because I train with some of the top guys in MMA. None of them fight angry, okay? Does Alexander Karelin ever just see red when he wrestles, huh? Does John Jones or Anderson Silva or Gordon Ryan, do they just see red? Any of these greats, huh? Did you ever hear Muhammad Ali talking and he said he just sees red when he fights? Oh, no, they don't. Why? It's because all the greats, and anyone who actually knows how to fight, knows that going into a fight angry, you're going to make mistakes, and you will end up catching a punch or two, or you'll end up getting caught in a submission that's stupid. Imagine you go into battle reckless, and you get a spear to the throat by a completely calm opponent. Secondly, anyone who actually fights, even if they're in top physical condition, world champions, even they get tired after a burst of rage lasting a minute, okay? Imagine fighting in a battle that lasts 2 or 3 days, like in ancient times. So it's not anger we're looking for, guys. The real Berserker State would be more spiritual. It would be more of a trance. It would be a flow. It would be energetic, but also relaxed. It would feel euphoric, but also intense, with good reaction time and awareness. You would feel light and floating, just like henbane makes you. This is how you can fight your best for many, many hours, getting into this flow state, as we call it in any competitive sports. So how do we get into this state? Well, it has more to do with meditation and focus than it does with having a temper tantrum. But to get to these states, remember, the whole goal is to send your spirit, your hugid in the Norse beliefs, out of your body, and you send that out of your body and you bring in the hugid of a wolf or a bear or whatever to your body. So it's going to be a similar thing as these types of shamanistic type rituals that we see around the world that have the same purpose. There would be chanting, maybe even some breath work, drumming would be very good, banging spears on shields, creating certain vibrations, sounds, frequencies through instruments, or even singing. I would also definitely say a dance of some sort was done. We know they did this, guys. All cultures in the world did some sort of war dance to get in the state to achieve that. From the Norse sources, we actually have some images and some archaeological finds that you see there depicting dancing. We also have a decent description of the Vikings who were serving as the Emperor's Guard in Constantinople, doing a dance. They were dancing in 2 circles, clashing spears upon their shields. Some of them were wearing skins, some of them were wearing masks, along with chants of certain phrases. One of the words that was noted as kept being repeated was the phrase "tul." We don't know exactly what that means, but here are a few possibilities. And we don't know that these were actually berserkers in the Varangian Guard that this source was writing about, but it sure as hell sounds like it. But for me, I don't think it matters a whole lot exactly the ritual we use to get ourselves into this state. I think the more important part is the repetitiveness and the trance. It's like the same rhythm and pattern over and over again helps you get to this state of mind. And there actually is some science to this, which I covered in a recent Patreon video. Yeah, that stuff is not to be shared out there in the open. But yeah, you get the idea. Hope you enjoyed the sources and give some ideas. Some of these things we might be able to try today, some of these things not, but yeah, let me know any experiences, parallels for any other cultures that you know of. Where are your homelands? Where are your ancestors from? Because, like I said, probably you had a similar thing to this no matter where you are in the Indo-European world and potentially the whole world. So let us all know, we'd love to hear. That's all for today. Vi ses nästa gång.